You're listening to the Product Coalition podcast with Jay Stansel. This is where product mastery happens. This is where careers are made. Welcome to the Product Coalition podcast. Let's go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Product Coalition podcast. Today, I've got a very special guest, Randy Rolls, who's joining me to dive in the fascinating world of services product management. Randy's an expert in creating products within professional services for ECM and DAM clients. He's going to be shedding light on what sets services product management apart from standard product teams and standalone application delivery teams. So we're going to explore services product trio, agile working norms, unique phases of engagement from mobilization to go live. And we're going to also be discussing the critical role of services product manager beyond the service team and why product management thinking is absolutely essential in this space. So Randy, welcome. So glad to have this episode moment with you.
Thank you. It's very great to be here and wonderful to be able to have this conversation.
Excited to get going, but before we do, Randy, could you introduce yourself and
Yes.
What's your origin story as to how you got to this moment today?
Yep. So I've been working in the tech industry for about 20 years now. Started at the bottom, worked my way up, and have been involved in digital asset management and enterprise content management and records management for the past 15 years or so. And my background's in digital media and production areas, and it's just kind of progressed from there into being in professional services. Then about 4, 5, 6 years ago or so, I discovered the world of product management and started incorporating that into our practices of professional services, because there's a huge amount of value there that we've been able to gain by bringing that into our practice. And for me, I've been at several big companies, including Nuxio, Highland. I'm now currently with Iron Mountain. The information I'm giving here is my own personal opinions on the matters. But it is very vital and has been important to our success over the course of the different professional services teams I've been involved in.
Nice. Randy, why did this topic feel to you like the right topic to bring onto the show around introduction to services product management?
So over the past, like I said, I discovered product management about 6 years ago or so. But over the past 2 years or so, given the pandemic that occurred and the increase in virtual conferences, product management has absolutely taken off. And especially with the introduction of the product trio, everybody's been abuzz with different ways of approaching product management. And they haven't been talking about how things actually get delivered once the product exists. And the fact that there's still teams out there that are building applications on all these different platforms that are responsible for delivering that value of the product to large enterprise organizations or even small, medium businesses that have the budget to pay for it. But all of these different large platforms, going from Figma to Miro to Mural to Adobe, they all have professional services teams that then have to deliver things when these large contracts get made. If any product is offering an enterprise level option in their subscription service, that means they have some team responsible for delivering those artifacts to the customer. And the product management pieces and the value of that approach still matters to make sure that the people purchasing your product from the main core product team is being realized by those customers. It's not just about tracking the individual user journey or the individual user transactions or the team, small business, or the team level things and tracking that, which you can do easily using all sorts of different tools nowadays. It's about tracking that relationship and just simply getting the client up and running in the first place. So that's where it really comes into being. And within professional services, we need to mirror what's being done to make sure that our clients are achieving that value.
No, so when we're thinking about services as the product, when you were first, as you say, like going back 6 years ago, and you were being exposed to product management, what were the key points that you saw as different that you're doing today that you weren't doing back then before you?
Yep. The major piece was the focus on discovery and being able to actually put words against the actions we were trying to do. And that allowed us to communicate that and the importance of that up to senior leadership within the company, and show that, hey, at the beginning of our implementation, we need to have a mobilization phase. This goes into that what you mentioned earlier about talking about the phases, is that after the contract gets signed, somebody went out and there was a lot of pre-sales activity. Somebody decided this is what they need. So that's what was sold to that company. And then when we come in as professional services, we have to mobilize, bring our team together, make sure everybody's on board, actually get the customer folks that are going to be doing the implementation also on board, and then making sure that what we're trying to deliver matches what they actually need. And that's where that discovery and mobilization phase comes into place, whereby we can meet with them and have those customer interviews, verify those OKRs, make sure that we're actually tracking against what the customer needs. Because more often than not, a senior leader or whoever was doing the purchasing of the product isn't necessarily the person or the group using the product. So they may have been working together behind the scenes, but we have to actually establish through that discovery process that what we're going to build, how we're going to configure it, the user journey used with user story mapping is actually going to meet their needs versus just delivering what was written in the original SOW, or maybe that's too vague. And whoever did the purchase was like, yes, we need an ECM. But what does that mean to the people actually involved with the content? So we've been able to go through, establish a core services trio. So we end up with a project manager, a services product manager, and then an engineering lead. And those three come together to guide the client through the process, engage them through workshops, and actually complete that discovery so we can define our user stories and build out our scope of delivery. And that deliverable and that scope is the product that's being delivered through professional services.
Going back to this change of approach, Randy, what was some of the challenges you saw or faced when it comes to change management, in terms of you found a new way of thinking, but then you've got to bring others on board? What's your style of trying to achieve that?
Well, there's change management both inside of us as a delivery organization, where we have to convince sales that investing money up front, where if we're spending a week to 3 weeks, or depending on the size of the project, or it could be just 3 to 5 days, not doing building, not doing configuration. It's all workshops, it's discussing, it's making sure we're defining the problem and identifying the problem right. We had to go through change management internally to show them that that was actually going to lead to more successful deliveries. So we did a pilot internally. We took a small project and we took a medium-sized engagement, and we went through the process with those engagements. And at the end of it, we showed we had a more successful deliverable. We had a client that was happier, a client that actually understood what they were using and what they were receiving from us. And it led to a better handoff to our support and customer success teams for that ongoing relationship. Now, internally to the client, change management also has to occur and be driven by that professional services team and that core services trio, where we have to teach them this is what you are getting. So by repeating those actions of discovery and making sure we're all looking at the same target and building towards that target together, that eases our burden of making sure that they understand what was delivered to them. So then their internal teams at the client side can receive that. They can work directly with that services product manager to ask questions and understand, hey, what does this do? What is the purpose of this? And then work directly with that engineering lead to understand, how does this work? So you have 2 points of contact. They know exactly who to ask the questions of. They're not searching out and asking a committee. They're not funneling everything through one point of contact. They have 3 different points of contact depending on what they need to ask. And that eases their change management burden as well, and allows them to then transition, start onboarding, going through all that process of getting people in and using that item successfully.
Randy, for the audience, what size of deal or application are we talking about here? Because I appreciate the world of
That varies.
can be one person on their own in a startup through
Yep.
to Fortune 500 or Fortune 50 company. So
Mm-hmm.
do you mind setting a little bit of scope around the space that you're playing in, or that you see the
Yeah.
fit for this to be applied?
Yep. So as soon as you're moving into the quote enterprise space, or you want to move beyond just the team level deliverable, that's usually where a professional services team comes into being. So you have your product led growth, you have your product going out there, people are actively using it, interacting with that. That can be your step in the door. And then somebody within either a larger org of 100, like 50 to 100 users, or even larger, up to the thousands of users within some large enterprise environments, decides this is a product that we need to use. They're going to reach out to you, and then you're going to go through a sales process. It's no longer product led growth at that point. It is an actual sales organizational led growth opportunity. And then that sales organization has to hand that work over to somebody. Oftentimes early on, it's done directly by your main product team and your main core engineering team. But eventually you're going to reach a breaking point where they need to focus on building the product. So then you have to bring new folks on board. You're bringing on a customer success lead. You're bringing on support leads. It's that natural organizational structure build out where all of a sudden we need delivery teams. And that can be a professional services team of just 3 people. It could be a professional services team of 10. It could be 15, and then it can scale out depending on the size and scope of your individual product or platform. Most of the ones that I've worked on have been regional. So I've been working in the North American regions, but then other times it's been global, where the product is sold around the world. So we have professional services teams in different regions, whether it be North America, Europe, Asia Pacific, so on and so forth. And that creates silos. It's all the same stuff you deal with inside of a product team, where all of a sudden you have a global product platform, then you have regional product variations. It's all those same problems, just on the how do we configure this for this particular need.
Awesome. So in the world of product led growth, it's normally about the user buying the thing, the transaction happening, and then it gets
Yeah.
handed over to CSMs, and they do an awesome job at retention, growth,
Yeah.
etc. In this world, it sounds when you start to get big enough to need your pre-sales engineers and pre-sales architects and
Exactly.
start
Yep.
to appear in the sales conversation, then you're probably big enough to start prepping for this post-transaction.
Exactly.
When so the obvious spot for me is then CSMs are handling customer success in all forms of variations. It may be purely around the account adoption, integration. It may also be overlapped with support and debugging and communication, as well as monthly, quarterly account check-ins. When does that get too much for them, that services product management comes in, that a team of CSMs simply need more support that you see?
Yeah. I think the major piece there is the question of whether you're delivering a configurable platform or if you're delivering a point solution. So if you think back on like the evolution of, say, Canva started out where they had a point solution of go in, you can do these actions, you can create your items, and then it delivers. It's very easy to understand, had a great user interface. You don't have any, like, it's easy to use and has that product like growth opportunities and approach going on. But as they've added new functionalities, they now have more than just that one singular point solution. And they need to be able to offer greater experiences to these larger customers that are expecting more from them. So all of a sudden, it's not just the CSM that's there for, oh, I have all these different customers and individuals to worry about, and I'm looking at customer success as a whole bubble. They actually now have a CSM that's assigned to just this one client. And all of a sudden, that client has expectations around, when am I going to get my work delivered? And at that point, somebody somewhere signed a contract saying it's going to be delivered for that customer. So if it doesn't fit in your overall product backlog and your product roadmap, somebody has to do that additional work to then deliver that to the client. This is once again an opportunity for more teams and new developers, but they need some management around that. Professional services, often, like I said, we have the services product manager who's managing what does that client need, what are our user stories. They're doing product ownership, they're doing discovery, they're interacting with that client on a daily basis to make sure that they deliver what that client needs. And then you have your engineering lead and your engineering team that is there available to interact with the core product team, but add functionality that could be feature flagged just to that one customer. Eventually, that work done by your professional services team often leads back into the core product for use by other customers, if it's general enough, or it's feature flagged to that one customer, or to that one instance that one customer uses, because there was enough payment there. And that's another part of this, is that your professional services team is a revenue opportunity, because all of a sudden your customer's paying for that team to build things for them. So you, instead of doing that bespoke engineering on your main product platform, you can do that bespoke engineering, bespoke configuration just behind feature flags or in that one instance for that customer. And then your product trio and your professional services team becomes a stakeholder of your overall core product team. So your professional services team is going to interact with your pre-sales teams, your sales teams, the support folks, customer success. Anytime they have issues, they may interact directly with professional services team to resolve those without having to involve core product or core product engineering. At the same time, they are a stakeholder for that platform product team, for that individual product delivery solution team that's doing this one particular piece of the product as far as integrations or just simply new things and new features. But their focus is not on feature development. Their focus is on solving the problems of those big customers that can provide a new revenue stream for the company and is worth it. And you need folks to do the work.
Awesome. Right. I'm gonna get into then what I think is going to be the tricky part of all of this is expectations up front are given from sales on the timeline to complete this work.
Oh, yes.
So how, in your world, knowing the sales happen, money's changed hands, you're getting going, do you balance deadlines with Agile's ways of working and expectations?
Yep. So that the best way to do that is make sure that you do not avoid selling things as fixed cost. That's a huge risk to you. Fixed cost is always a huge risk to you. What you want to do is you want to build a relationship with the clients so that you can work in time and materials. So they're paying you as the work is delivered. And then using those agile tenets of backlog management, grooming, sprinting, so on and so forth, you can provide that customer with the updates as you're building the item for them. And the other important part of that is the phases of execution. So you have mobilization, going in, completing the discovery, making sure that you've established the working agreements, making sure you've established the target and those outcomes that the client wants to achieve, and also how they're going to measure you for that delivery. Once you've established that, you build the backlog, agree on scope. Then you can actually do some work to establish a cadence of delivery. You can deliver those items as you get them done. And the best thing is, because you are building that relationship with the client over the course of delivery, instead of them waiting 6 to 9 months to get something, which is a waterfall type situation, if you do all this work up front to define all the different possibilities, they're actually able to pivot their solution with their needs. So if they suddenly go through a reorg, or they buy a new division, or they grow exponentially somewhere and realize we need to change focus and put more work into this area, we can pivot with them and keep delivering to them based on what they need at that time, which once again builds that relationship, brings in more benefit to both you as a platform provider or as a product team and a professional services team, and to them as a large client, that they're actually getting benefit from it. So
Nice.
that's that execution phase.
Awesome question come in through through LinkedIn. Thank you, Tanya, for
Hmm.
sharing this. And I think it comes back to the points you're trying to make around maybe time and materials. But you tell me your thoughts on this. And so the question here is how to say no to a really important customer or a request
Hmm.
from a customer in this space instead of covering up
Hmm.
with whatever you want to cover that up and to get out
Yeah.
of taking that request on
Yep.
board. What are your tactics there?
So the main tactics I've seen and I've had great success with over the years is having very large transparency with your customer. You need to make sure that you firmly establish this is our area that we focus on. These are the areas that we're doing. This is the build that we're doing. These are the features and the value we're providing to you. If they come in with a request out of left field or coming out of nowhere where it's just like that doesn't fit in our box that we're working in, you can use that transparency to say we've established this is what we're working in. What you're asking for is not related to that at all, so it's not appropriate for us to take that on. Other times, the other big thing is making sure that you're not just chasing the revenue. Sales teams, if their compensation is related just to what gets sold versus the success of what gets sold, will go out and they'll sell the moon because there's nobody holding them accountable for making sure that what they sell is feasible, is appropriate, and can be delivered. So oftentimes there have to be checks in place to make sure that before the sale gets signed and everybody agrees that this is what we're going to do, somebody has to take a look at that. And that will involve your core product team to make sure that what they're selling is either a feature set we have or is a feature set that's going to be available in the timeline the customer wants. And then you have to have executive leadership that's willing to say, we're not going to, like, that revenue sounds great, but it doesn't match up with our core vision. It doesn't match up with our values. It's not what we want to build on. And then you just simply have to say no, but, and this is the important part, is that you can say no, but, and you can direct the client because you've built a relationship with them. You can direct them to say, hey, we can't do this, but here's an option that you can pursue to get it done. Or, hey, we can't do this, but we could work with this other group and bring them in as a subcontractor to deliver that for you. So you have options as you grow to be able to negotiate those. And sometimes it's just a matter of sticking with your vision and being radical about that transparency, radical about holding to that vision of what your product is meant to be, what the value you're offering your customers, as opposed to just tacking on features from everywhere. Even the standard core product teams have to deal with that every day when it comes to the difference between being an empowered product team versus a feature factory.
I love the point here that obviously yes, product teams face that challenge, but everything there is within their control, and
Mm-hmm.
bias is minimalized by external factors. But in this instance, the bias of external factors might be a 6 or 7 figure check trying to
Right.
influence that change. I'm really curious to know so in order for that to succeed, I'd expect that strategically the guide rails of what the organization says yes to and no to are clear for everybody
Mm-hmm.
involved. It doesn't feel
Yeah.
like we like this client, so it's a yes for them, and we don't like that client because it's a
Mm-hmm.
no for them. How have you seen exceptional communication around the guide rails of what an organization says yes to and
Yep.
no to, knowing that there is so much flexibility when there's a dev team waiting to take on and do the services
Mm-hmm.
work?
Yep. So the main ways that I've seen that done is by having great communication between your core product team, your professional services team, and your sales team. That relationship management has to be there, whereby the sales team is receiving the same training that your developers are receiving. Your sales team is exposed to the same capability training that your professional services team knows. And as things develop and as you build that roadmap, you expose the sales team to, hey, here's the roadmap. And you'd have to teach them the realities of that roadmap. The now near future or now next future roadmap is incredibly valuable for that, and is great. It's a great communication tool to the professional services team as well, to know that, hey, we're building like the core product team's building something now. That means we don't necessarily need to do that. We can just communicate with them, find out their delivery, we'll include that in. If it's future, then maybe we need to pull that in and build it ourselves because it is on the roadmap. And then from a sales perspective, they have to have a way to escalate those questions of, hey, we have a client that wants something. It's in the future column. Can we bring that in as a higher priority? What are our options to communicate this back to the client? And if somebody asks for something that's nowhere on that roadmap, then the sales team has to be empowered to actually say, no, that's not something that we offer. I'll take it back and see what we can find out. But at this time, it's just not part of it. And like I mentioned, that's the importance of linking compensation to the success of engagements. That creates a want within your entire organization to not just do the sale and your transaction, it disappears. You got paid, you got your commission, it's gone. All of a sudden, if your compensation is linked to the success of the project and success of the engagement and the success of the delivery, then you're going to want to make sure that what you sell actually exists and can be delivered, because you're going to get your initial commission, but then you're going to have something that comes in later once it's successful. The failure of a large engagement, the failure of deliveries, normally is directly related to something being sold that didn't exist, or something being sold with promises that it would get done from a high level without anybody that actually does the work being checked with to verify, can this be done? Will this fit in the delivery timeline? How do we manage this? And if we make a promise to one group over here, who are we excluding from previous promises, or what are we taking out of the flow of work? And it's not easy. I'd be the first to say it is one of the hardest things to manage and keep track of. But once again, it's all about that radical transparency, making sure you're keeping communication alive, and folks knowing, what are we all working towards together? What is the vision of the product? Those vision statements and knowing what your actual outcome-driven targets are really make a huge difference.
One of the things here, Andy, that I'm keen to go into is, how do you handle the conflict of interest? So in a PLG company, we're looking for maximum value for everyone in using the software. In your world, as you were saying at the start, time and materials, not fixed cost. How do you process when the client wants X, but you see little to no value that X will ever get used? It might be one of those once a year, almost like tax time types features that it's a tick box and then it's forgotten about until there's a change of management, or tax time comes again. How do you handle the conflict of interest between saying yes to everything to maximize TMM invoices and wanting to build value that fundamentally has a significant impact for that client and customer?
Yep. So once again, that comes down to, what are we actually working towards? Because if we're working towards long-term client retention, long-term client value, not doing that one thing right away allows them to come back and do something bigger with you at a later date. They're still a customer. They're still paying that subscription. They're still using your product. But that doesn't mean you have to do all the work all the time. And building that trust between you as a product org and as a customer success manager, they come into this conversation a lot, is huge for this, because all of a sudden your client's realizing, oh, they want me to succeed. They're not just here to make a buck off of me. They're not here to just string me along and keep billing me and invoicing me over time and time and time again. They're actually looking out for, what is my long-term value? What am I getting out of this? How are my outcomes being met? And the other big part of this is data. Being able to just spend that time with the customer and say, okay, I understand you're asking for this particular process to be done. How many users do you have using this? What's the volume of content going through here? What's the velocity of things coming through? If you have one big item coming through once a month, is it worth automating? Or can you just pay the person to keep doing the work? If that velocity starts increasing, where instead of having one item per month, it's now one item per week, then adding a little bit of automation comes into play. Iterate on the problem. Take small chunks of it that will provide good value return, implement that first, and then come back to it and see where it goes. Do the discovery work. Do that iteration. Even in even in the major product, for a specific configuration, you could do A/B testing. You could say, okay, let's go ahead and let's put up a fake door. We're going to provide a button that folks can click on. And when they click on it, they can then tell us what they're why they wanted to use that particular feature. Leave that out there in the configuration for that client for a month or two. The VP that was asking for this particular feature, they said, everybody's using this. They need this every day. All of a sudden you have some data to show them, we got 3 clicks over the course of 2 months out of X number of users. Maybe we need to talk to the people doing the work and find out from them, what is the biggest pain point that you have? That's that continuous discovery, that continuous process of working with the customer. And that's what that services product manager should be doing on a daily basis with those clients and engagements they're on, is finding out, hey, do you have any new pain points? Anything new we need to work on if it's a long-term relationship? At the beginning of a set of work, you go through that in the discovery and that mobilization phase of making sure you're identifying the biggest pain points. That's that validation of, is what sales sold and thinks they need, is what the buyer thinks they need, the same thing as the folks doing the work actually need. There's been a lot of talk lately around who the buyer of a product is, as far as finding your product market fit. And sometimes that matters around like senior leadership, the C-suite, they're the buyer. They're the ones writing the checks. But you have to have that bottom up motion of the people doing the work need to discover your product first. Or you have to do a top down whereby, yeah, they bought it, but now you need to actually talk to the people doing the work to make sure that you're delivering what they need, not just what the C-suite thinks they need.
Nice. When you was talking through sort of the working patterns, discovery, delivery, etc., a question that's come to mind for me here, Andy, is: do you bring the client in to prioritization sessions so that that's part of setting the order of
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And this comes back to a sense of scale, as far as if this is a small business, very specific problem statement, you can look at that scope and realize this is about 3 weeks to 3 to 6 weeks worth of delivery. They don't have to be in every prioritization session, because you're going to be able to show them the full scope of what you're planning to build. You're going to have acceptance criteria in there. You're going to have agreement. You're going to have grooming around that. You're going to be able to frame what you're building and what you're delivering for them and prioritize that with them. Then you're going to get to the end, go through UAT, have them test it, use that acceptance criteria to drive their test scenarios, and then they'll be able to go forward, go live, have some hyper support there, as far as being there ready in case something goes wrong, right at go live. But then for larger things, you're going to have phases. So you're going to go through, you're going to repeat that action, that iteration of discovery and doing scope identification for phase 1. Get that out there, let that go live. Then you're going to initiate phase 2. Repeat that entire process again. Make sure the client's part of that prioritization. Make sure they're continuously part of that conversation, in case, oh, we originally thought phase 2 was going to be used by this particular group in California. That group, their sales have gone down, regulations changed, they no longer exist. Instead, we need to focus on this group out of Texas or Florida or anywhere else within it, or it could be global based on countries. It could just be based on a particular segment of users, as far as instead of focusing on people doing the ingest and working on content, it could be the folks working on, hey, we need to mail these items out and make sure that they get delivered properly. There's any number of areas that could come into play depending on your product.
Nice. My next question, thinking through the delivery loop here, is how much involvement from the client is too much? Are you involving the client in writing features, defining acceptance criteria, working on UX, and letting
Yep.
them be the overarching decision maker on all of that, or
Mhm.
are you bringing them in for select pieces of that process?
Yeah. I've seen both of those scenarios work successfully. It really depends on the maturity of the client and the willingness and availability of that client to be involved on a daily basis. Some of the most successful implementations I've been involved in had the client doing verification, whereby they didn't write the user stories. We did that as a professional services team. We did the initial testing. We immediately handed it off to the client. They did a second round of testing. And then because of that, they were able to immediately build out their documentation, build out their user manuals, and say, this meets our needs, deploy it to production. That was much more of a continuous innovation, continuous deployment situation. Other times, the client's like, we have a team of 3 people. They are incredibly busy. We're doing this implementation to save them time overall. We're going to be able to time box and give you our attention at certain points. And in that case, they're not going to be there every day. You're going to meet with them, give them a status update each week. And then at the end of that round of development, which you want to try and minimize, that way they get value sooner. You don't want to wait months. You don't want to wait like 6 months or 12 months. You want to be talking about this and let's deliver something in 6 weeks. Let's deliver something in 8 weeks. Get it out there. Save the users some time on something initially. It means you're not going to be doing everything all at once. You're going to be focusing on what's the biggest pain point, how can we relieve some of that pain. And over time, the really cool thing is that you're going to start getting feedback from those users on what you've already delivered. They're going to see the value of this iterative approach, this approach of let's get something out there, then we can make it better. They're going to see that value over time. And if they're involved in that verification process, they're involved in that testing at some level, they're going to understand what they actually received. But once again, it depends on client maturity. Some clients just simply do not have that, at which point, oftentimes you have to raise up to their executive leadership of the problem you're experiencing is because the people you have working with us aren't paying attention. We give them documentation. We've repeated this with them 10 times and they're still messing it up, which is causing more problems and causing that snowball effect downhill of everybody's unhappy because this person that's responsible for doing this one part just can't get it right.
Right. That brings me on to then my next question. You wake up on the 1st of November and you're looking back at October. What, in your world, what are the KPIs you're looking back at to determine whether you had a successful month or not? What are you measured against?
So that really depends on where you are within the organization, because you're going to have folks that are involved in day-to-day engagements. Those are going to be your actual services product managers. They're going to be focused on what was our throughput? How many bugs did we have? Did we have a go live that went successfully? Did we get through a mobilization phase and get through that scope and reach agreement? That's going to be their KPIs. Also looking at use of the principles. So it's not about defining for them, you need to document everything this particular way. You need to use these forms. You need to use these things. It's more about telling them, you need to have the conversation with your engineers. Here's some templates to get you started. We want to iterate on this as a department as well. And that leads into services operations, or in the product world, it's product operations. It's that background team that's assisting your product managers, that's providing them with user data, that's providing them with Jira projects, that's providing them with templates, that's providing them with working tools, and iterating and taking that feedback from the product team and using that to iterate and provide better services back to them so they can do their jobs better. Same thing has to eventually start happening in your services organization, whereby you have professional services operations, where they're providing financial guidance to your project managers. They're providing engineering training to your new engineers that are onboarding so that you can have paired programming. They're taking in, they're gathering all that documentation from the product team, from the core product engineering team, from customer success, all these different places, and putting it in one place to build up a knowledge base. So when somebody is onboarded as a new services product manager, you can say, go here, start reading in this order. This is what you need to start learning. and they're building out that training process and that organizational growth piece. So scaling up an organization is never simple. It's never easy. The same problems that exist within a product team exist within a professional services team, exist within a customer services team or a customer success team. It's all about planning. Communication definitely helps.
Nice. Talking about shared problem spaces, I'm keen to hear from you, Randy. For those that are in product management and seeing opportunities in the market, job openings in services product management, what recommendations would you give them into when they're going through that interview process in services product management to double down on the strengths and advantages they have because they come from SaaS or PLG companies that that can give them an advantage in that process?
Yeah.
And following on from that, what are the things they need to be aware of that they wouldn't have experienced in a pure standalone product organization?
Biggest things they need to be aware of is that they're going to have to track their time.
Right.
Because you're doing billing based on hours spent on projects, you're going to have to track that time. It gets annoying, but it's part of the process of making sure that you have that revenue stream coming in as you do the work. During the interview process, the number one thing that I'm always looking for is about finding and identifying problems properly. So how you go through that discovery process, what your interview process is with users to define the what of the situation. It's not just about, hey, let's give you the solution. Here you go. Here's your widget. Go. It's about, we need to actually identify what is the problem we need to solve and then get the customer to that process. One thing in professional services is that it's depending on the space, it's often a little bit more technical. So if you've ever done any interviews or looked at documentation around how technical product managers go through the interview process, that oftentimes will come up in professional services as well, especially if it's for a SaaS product. People are going to expect you to understand the concepts of online storage, whether that be S3, Google Cloud buckets. They're going to expect you to understand the basics of, hey, we have these different pods that are running and they have to be deployed. The software development lifecycle process of let's build internally, then deploy to the next stage, test again, then deploy again, test again. And problem management is another big one, where in a standard product delivery process, you have a bug that comes in, you have to go through that. How do we solve this? How do we dive into the details of what is the root cause analysis for this bug? Same thing happens over here, except for it's going to be a lot more important because you've got the more time you spend solving that bug, that's time you're not making money. And it's not something you can sometimes just roll back because there's people reliant on you in a production environment and you have to get there. So looking at root cause analysis process, looking at that, identifying the problem. Jobs to be done is a wonderful framework for helping you approach that. It's making some traction in product management, but even when it comes to product owners within the product management world, the focus currently is still so much on that initial, as a person, I want to X so that Y. And that's an incredibly limiting space. Actually understanding that customers, the classic adage is they don't want to put a hole in the wall. They want to hang a picture. Getting through that and moving beyond just the business analyst of taking in data, writing it all down, and actually being able to understand and bring that data to the table from an analysis perspective is very vital and important.
Awesome. I'm keen to wrap up the episode with a smile here, Andy. So we've spoken a lot about what to do in services product management for the last 40 minutes. So for you and the audience, here's a little parody that hopefully qualifies and stacks up for everything you shouldn't be doing in services product management. So have a listen and watch, and keen to know what you think. Here we go.
If your projects run like a circus, congrats, you're a services product manager in the making. Today, we're diving into the ultimate guide on how to manage your services products. First up, forget about the services product trio. Collaboration, just wing it solo. Agile approach, more like fragile approach. Stick to rigid plans and avoid flexibility at all costs. Next, titles. In a professional services org, just slap any title on anyone. Product manager, project manager, sandwich artist, it's all the same, right? Skills and thinking patterns, overrated. Now, the phases of engagement. Mobilization through go live? Nah, just jump straight to go live and hope for the best. Who needs preparation when you can have pure chaos? And the impact of a services product manager, stakeholder influence? Nah, just stay in your bubble and ignore everyone else. It's not like your decisions affect the entire organization or anything. So what's the product being delivered? Who cares? How is services related to the core product team? It's not. And the difference between product owner and product manager skills, there is none. Remember, folks, the key to success is doing everything wrong. Until next time, keep it chaotic.
Keep it chaotic. There we go. What's your thoughts on that, Randy?
The one grain of truth that came through that is that titles are going to vary across the board, in that you're going to have people called a consultant. You're going to see people functional consultant, functional architect, product owner. There's going to be professional services agent. All these different titles are out there for these different things. And that's not going to change anytime soon, because HR organizations always run anywhere from 5 to 10 years behind when it comes to titles. So when it comes to job searching and hunting, look less at the title, more at the description of what the work is. Look for key phrases around user stories, scoping, product ownership. That's a big one. And sometimes they still refer to these jobs as being business analysts or just business consultant. And I don't want anybody to be limited just to a title. A business analyst can do the work of product services management just as well as somebody coming from a product management background, or a product owner that's realizing I want to do something more, or even from a TPM or technical product manager. All these different areas can funnel through. But yeah, keep it chaotic. That is gonna be the starting point for a lot of these services orgs, and starting down the road of bringing balance and bringing actual process into the organization. It's not simple. It's not easy. But discovery, making sure you know what you're building, executing on that, and then making sure that they have success at the end. Those 3 steps, and linking that value chain all the way through your business organization, so everybody's linked to the success of your clients, or the annual recurring revenue of your clients. That's a big term that gets out there. As soon as you can link everybody's success to that annual recurring revenue and that client success, you're going to have people focused on customer value and client value, as opposed to just building features and throwing things out there.
I love that. Awesome sound advice to finish up, particularly for those looking for new challenges or currently looking for a role, is not to be intimidated by titles you're unfamiliar with. Actually get into the details of the roles and responsibilities, and you might find a lot that's very familiar to you and where you can add value, that even though the job title isn't necessarily what you've been running with for the last 10 years. Randy, thank you so much. This has been an awesome episode with a real unique topic and some unique angles and thinking that I haven't heard before. So I've really enjoyed this. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you, Jay. It's been a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to seeing the conversation on the comments and everything for the videos.
Awesome. Thanks, Randy. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Product Coalition podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Product Coalition, head over to productcoalition.com, or you can find us over on Substack as well. Until the next episode, thanks for your time, and I hope you've enjoyed the session.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Product Coalition podcast, hosted by Jay Stansel. Got questions or want to explore more topics? Connect with Jay on LinkedIn or join the ever-growing Product Coalition community on Substack. Thanks for listening.